The media was silent about gangs taking over apartment complexes, saying it was some sort of right-wing conspiracy theory. Well, conspiracy no longer.
That sounds about right, yes.
The people who managed the buildings who were overrun by Venezuelan gangs are speaking out with a full timeline of everything that happened. Welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And today we're going through a Twitter thread from CBZ Management, the management company that owns several buildings in Aurora, Colorado, that again were overtaken by Venezuelan prison gangs. But before we get into the timeline, I just want to take a moment, take us back to how the media has covered this entire situation. Police deny Venezuela gang has taken over rundown apartment complex in Denver suburb. Aurora police chief says there's no evidence that Venezuelan gangs took over apartments. Aurora leaders backtrack on overstated claims of Venezuelan gang activity. It started out as some sort of conspiracy theory, according to the media, something that even the police were denying. Then, after all these crazy headlines, a local councilwoman posted a video online showing Venezuelan migrants overtaking apartment complexes, the same ones that were in question from the beginning, and suddenly, independent and fair-minded journalists started paying attention. And now the management company came with receipts, and you guys, I feel so vindicated. I'm going to take you through this tweet thread in its entirety. This is from, again, CBZ Management, and it says, gangs have taken control of several of our properties in Aurora, Colorado. In an attempt to discredit this fact for political purposes and avoid governmental accountability, some, aka the media, have spread false information about our situation. Let's set the record straight. Oh, this is so badass and obsessed. This says, we started managing these buildings when new owners acquired the Colorado properties in 2019. At the time, the properties were in poor condition, and our mission was to renovate them, thereby increasing their value. This was an ambitious project that would significantly benefit the people of Aurora while providing returns to the new owners. Completely normal, nothing stands out as a red flag to me. We understand this project would take years to yield results and would be both time-consuming and costly, involving comprehensive upgrades to every unit and the overall structure. To manage the project effectively, given our New York-based operations, our representative moved to Colorado with his family. So again, this is a big key here. They sent a New York-based representative to Colorado to manage the shift of this building as they kind of flipped these, for better lack of a word, shitty buildings. The tweet goes on to say, we also undertook a complete renovation of nearly every unit in the now well-known building you've seen in the news. The images shown depict our newly renovated apartments. Everything was progressing smoothly, property values were rising, and vacancy rates were dropping. It was a win-win for both the owners and the city of Aurora. Then, the gangs arrived. Oh my gosh, it reads like a book. Now, warning, this is quite graphic. At the same time, we noticed a rise in crime and tenant complaints after the gang arrived. The most alarming moment occurred when our local CBZ management representative, the one that was sent from New York to Colorado, was attacked at the end of 2023. He had gone to inspect a recently vacated 3-bedroom apartment, a rare occurrence for such a large unit, only to find a group of men already inside. When he refused their $500 bribe, which, can we take a moment to say that there were people bribing apartment complex owners to stay for $500? They brutally attacked him. The photo was taken shortly after he escaped, just before being admitted to the hospital. The video footage comes from one of our security cameras capturing part of the assault. This is the result of what happened to the apartment complex manager. And towards the end of this video, you can see him getting attacked. Now, I want to pause here because this started in 2023. A local building manager was beaten senselessly for doing his job by migrants who may or may not be here legally. And if I had known about this story, I would have been screaming about this from the top of my lungs, off of every building, literally to anybody who would listen to me. And we have an entire sector of Colorado local news outlets that said and did nothing. Seriously? Because as you'll see, this attack is what set up the onus for the overtaking of the apartment complex. The tweet thread goes on to say, after the attack on our CBZ management representative, he began getting threatening text messages We also frequently found people illegally occupying newly vacated apartments during scheduled tours. Imagine being at an apartment complex, giving your scheduled tours, and all of a sudden you open the door and you're a prospective buyer or a renter and you just see illegal immigrants squatting in your would-be apartment. You're not going to rent there, obviously. This was initially attributed to an influx of migrants exploiting squatter laws. Oh, I could do a whole video on that. The management company even received a call from a tenant returning from vacation only to find strangers living in his apartment. So the illegal immigrants were also going into occupied apartments and taking them over. The legitimate tenant was forced to find a new home after police couldn't help him. The police were quite literally of no help in this situation. When confronted, many of these illegal tenants and squatters claimed they had already paid rent, which we soon realized was true, but not to the management company. They were paying rent to a different entity, and by entity, I mean gang. Yes, to address the entity, the management company was contacting every city official, anybody that they could go to get help with this problem, because illegal immigrants were being forced to pay a gang that was overseeing their rent, even though they didn't have any say over the management complex. It makes no sense. The management company goes on to say, unfortunately, none of these city officials were willing to take meaningful action. Meanwhile, the representative who had been beaten up continued receiving threatening messages in which these criminals revealed his home address and his spouse's name. Finally, this is key, the Aurora Police Department, the local police officials, FBI, and Homeland Security informed the management company that those sending the messages and controlling the buildings were part of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang from Venezuela. I really just want to stop and hone in on this. The Aurora Police Department, which the media constantly told us said there was no problem with the apartment complexes, were the ones to inform the management company that the people overtaking the apartment complex were from a notorious gang in Venezuela that operates in prison systems. So, lost on how the police could be the one to tell the management company that, and the police were also telling the media that, ooh, nothing was wrong. That doesn't make any sense. They, meaning APB or APD, the Aurora Police Department, FBI, and Homeland Security, also mentioned that our situation was a, quote, blip on the radar, as this gang is causing significant problems nationwide. 2 days after the FBI met with CBZ management, the gang confronted the on-site manager, the guy had already been beaten up, asserting control over these properties. The gang offered an ultimatum to this representative: share rental income 50-50 or lose the building permanently. They also threatened to harm him and his family. For the safety of our management team and their families, we withdrew them from the properties and focused on seeking help from the government and agencies. We actually have these texts. They are from that would be May 7th of this year. Somebody just texted the guy his address and then, tell your wife I said hello. The management representative said, sorry, who is this? To which the illegal immigrant or migrant, however you'd like to refer to him, called the man a pussy-ass Jew and proceeded to use the F word, not spelled correctly, and use a slur against Jewish people. The FBI, Homeland Security, and the local police were involved in this intrinsically, and yet an entire bureaucracy, including elected government officials in Colorado, and an entire media regime spent their time trying to gaslight you into believing that this was an alt-right conspiracy theory, instead of, doing their job and investigating what was actually happening. The tweet thread goes on to say, once we fully understood what the management company and our tenants were facing, we expected a swift response, with the city offering meaningful resources and police protection, perhaps even from the National Guard, to help us regain control of our properties. That's what I would expect if I were in their position, but that never happened. Instead, the company was left helpless, watching as violence, bullets, and destruction overtook their buildings. Many of their legitimate tenants fled out of fear. So not only is this wildly unfair, because it's not like this management company up and decided border policy, but they also had their entire business model destroyed because of the government's lack of input and help in the situation. Despite the obvious crisis, several city officials refused to acknowledge the reality. Instead, they blamed the management companies, citing code violations as the reason for shutting down our property. Violations they couldn't resolve for tenants who weren't theirs because they weren't legitimate tenants. Oh my gosh, how does that not connect in your head? One councilwoman, Danny Jurinsky, decided to take action after one of our last remaining legitimate tenants, Cindy Romero, reached out to her in desperation. Luckily, Cindy had her own cameras, as most of the management companies had been destroyed by the gangs, and provided video proof to the councilwoman. She realized the city could no longer ignore the situation if it was documented on camera. When she gathered sufficient video evidence, she assisted the tenant in relocating to safety before publicly releasing the footage. The management made one last post saying, despite clear evidence, many still denied the reality of the situation, sometimes using us as scapegoats. That's why we are no longer staying silent. We will continue to counter falsehoods with simple facts and evidence. Yes, gangs did take control of our apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, and the government did nothing. That is the real story. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I did reach out to CBZ management for confirmation of the story, and I will keep you posted with any additional information. But one ballsy journalist responded to this thread. Natalie Chuck of Denver 7 said, "Hi, CBZ management. Question. My coworkers and I at Denver Channel 7 have repeatedly reached out to you for comment and clarification over the last several weeks. Why decide to put this out now? And why not choose to speak to local journalists early on when confusion started?" The management company did answer and said, "We're just a company trying to give value to our tenants and owners. We're responding now out of frustration of media printing false information about us. Even many media outlets we did respond to ignored our fact. We'll be posting more on X so the public can see for themselves." They also added that most of the confusion came from the journalists, not from the management company. The real answer is because the media is not trustworthy. CBZ management was being nice in its response. It is a journalist's job to investigate the facts, push back on the narratives being put out by a bureaucracy and a government with an agenda. And our media doesn't do that anymore because they love to kiss the ass of the government and its agenda. So it's tactically smart to put your message out straight to the people instead of using a third party who can't be trusted. And the local reporters are not the only ones to blame, by the way. National News is doing the same pony show. JD Vance actually just went on ABC's This Week with Martha Raddatz, where Martha told JD that he needs to calm down because it's just a few apartment complexes overrun by gangs. What's the big deal?
Actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened. Martha. I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
This is America. There shouldn't be any apartment complexes overrun by Venezuelan prison gangs who illegally enter our country. Zero, none, zip. Is that clear, Martha? And truthfully, even Democrats know that this is a total mess. Bill Clinton was at a campaign rally for Kamala Harris and said that Laken Riley, a college student who was murdered by an illegal immigrant, probably wouldn't have died if Kamala had just secured the border.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up. So we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work. There wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
That makes no effing sense. How can you be campaigning for a woman who allowed unfettered immigration into the country as the borders are? And then she proceeds to run on change, right? But doesn't believe she'd change anything from the last 4 years when she was in office?
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years? There is not a thing that comes to mind.
Are you following this logic? Because I'm not. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you thought the most insane part of this video was. And if you're a real one and made it to the end, will you drop the eyes emoji so the media knows we've got eyes on this story? Thanks, friends. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment about how beautiful, stunning, and funny I am. And if you want more content based in logic, be sure to click over here for more videos and clips of my show. If you have the means to financially support the show, consider purchasing from my merch line, Based Apparel, linked right below. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends.